Hi, I'm Judy Fischel. Most people say they'd like to improve their memory. This is the last in a series of videos on what it means to study. We begin with two images that explain study skills and the part that memory plays in study skills. On the left side of the little head, you see information input such as reading, note-taking, and research. On the right side, you see output, writing, speaking, and test skills. The problem is that information goes in and information goes out, but nothing stays behind. Students often say that within days or weeks after finals, they have forgotten everything they learned in that course. Nothing is left in their heads. I call this image the empty head, and this is not studying. In this image, input information first goes to the brain for mental processing before going to output. I know it's hard to read the four behaviors in his brain, so I list them on the left side. Mental processing includes verbal organization, visual organization, critical thinking, and pathways to memory. And these are the names of the four videos in this series. I like to say that when the little head uses his brain, he's put on his thinking cap. Well, when you put on your thinking cap, when you use mental processing, then you are studying. How do you memorize information? You might remember some of it for a test, but not much longer. One of the best ways to memorize is using flashcards. With a pack of flashcards in my pocket, I used them on the subway, waiting for classes to start, waiting in lines, waiting for the laundry to finish. It felt good to have something useful to do in these otherwise wasted minutes. If you're not a student, you can still find many uses for flashcards. If you forget names of friends or customers, you might take their pictures. Tape them on one side of a card or use the pictures as cards. On the back, write the person's name and other helpful information. Mnemonics, notice the silent M, are methods to help you remember certain things, usually lists. They could also be called memory tricks. Acrostics are one kind of mnemonic. They use the letters in one word, or rarely in several words, to jog your memory. For example, can you name the Great Lakes? Can you name them in order? Homes is an acrostic that can jog your mind, but it won't help you at all if you don't know the names of the Great Lakes. Are you familiar with Roy G. Biv? Roy G. Biv is an acrostic that can help you remember the colors of the spectrum. Acronyms are similar, but they use a list of words, usually in an easy-to-remember sentence. The first letter of each word can jog your memory. Can you name the planets in order? Try using "My very excellent mother just served us noodles." The first letter in "my" is M, and the first planet is Mercury. The second planet starts with a V, Venus. There are many versions of these acronyms. When I first learned it, it was "My very excellent mother just served us 9 pizzas." But since then, Pluto has been demoted as a planet, so the acronym now needs to end with the N. One problem in acronyms like this is that Mercury and Mars here both begin with an M, and this happens frequently. So you need to remember which one came first. You can find many more versions of this acronym or of many others on the internet. You might find it easier, for example, to remember "My very exceptional mother just saw us naked." In Earth Science class, we had to remember the geological time periods. We were required to write it on every quiz or test all semester long. Just imagine if you needed to memorize these in order: Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Permian, Triassic, Cretaceous, Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, Pliocene, Pleistocene, and Holocene. Well, I found a great acronym online that uses this much more simple acronym. Cows often sit down carefully. Perhaps their joints creak. Persistent early oiling might prevent painful habits. So much easier. Notice that the first of the 3 lines here lists the period in the oldest or Paleozoic era. The second lists periods in the middle or Mesozoic era, and the third lists the epochs in the Cenozoic era. Of course, I had to learn all of these names and how to spell them, but it really helped to have the acronym jog my memory, and it made it much easier for me to write them on the tests. So, how do you get an acronym for a subject you're studying? The best way is to create your own, but you can always find them on the internet. Just search for acronym for. We also remember by using songs and rhymes. How did you learn the alphabet? Most of us still use 30 days has September, and we use I before E except after C or when sounding like A, as in neighbor and way. Another easy one, you might have learned Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. While you probably don't need that to remember 1492, you can easily invent your own simple rhymes to remember other people and dates. Using both hearing and seeing makes it easier to remember. A good example is remembering names. Most people sometimes forget people's names, and one way to remember is to picture them standing next to a person that you already know who has the same name. For example, I meet this young man named Richard, and I say, "Oh, Richard, my brother's name is Richard, and both of you are very tall." I meet this lovely lady whose name is Virginia, and I say, "Virginia, that's one of my favorite names. I was born in Virginia. My mother's name is Virginia." Virginia is definitely going to be easy to remember. Notice that I'm repeating the name several times, and I'm picturing images of this person along with the person I already knew. You might also associate the person with an object that rhymes with their name. You want something you can see in your mind. This man, for example, is named Ryan. Well, Ryan has yellow hair. Like a lion, and lion and Ryan rhyme. So I picture Ryan walking down the road with a lion, or perhaps he's dressed in a lion costume. Someone else might say Ryan rhymes with frying, and picture him with a frying pan on his head. The young woman's name is Janice. Janice sort of rhymes with Atlantis, so I could picture her covered with seaweed. Or maybe she's skinny like a praying mantis. I could picture her being green with very long arms and legs and her hands in a praying position. Or perhaps a giant praying mantis is just sitting there on her nose. To remember a vocabulary word, you can imagine a picture that describes the meaning of the word. My son once needed to learn the word stentorian. It means speaking in a loud voice, and it would be very hard to find a rhyming word for stentorian. So we broke it down. Sten sounds like stand. Tory sounds like a British soldier. Ian at the end is sort of like an inn, so we imagined a Tory in an inn standing up on a table so that he could be heard, and he is speaking in a loud voice. Altogether, you have a standing Tory in an inn. And now we could see it and hear it, stentorian. My son and I still remember the word, the definition, and the image. Some people learn best using kinesthetic memory, or moving your body. When someone gives me driving directions, I often find them hard to remember. But I can remember if I move my arms as I listen. If we're supposed to pass 4 traffic lights, I lift up one hand and point up where traffic lights would be 4 times. If we're supposed to turn right, I point right. If it's going to be the 3rd house on the left, I use my left hand and point 3 times to the left. I remember body movement much more easily than words. You can also use kinesthetic memory to remember events in history or events in a novel or play by acting it out, or review a science experiment by acting out each step. One of my favorites is building a model. You can even use the food on your plate at dinner to create a model of whatever you're studying. Here's a list of 8 new strategies. How many of them do you understand? Which ones are new to you? The first 2 are rated as some of the most powerful strategies for learning. Start by answering 2 questions. When you're studying for a test, are you more likely to reread the material or test yourself on what you learned? Would you learn more if you read the information 4 times, or if you read it once and tested yourself 3 times? According to the research, students who reread material do slightly better if they're tested after only 5 minutes. But when they're tested after a week, the students who read once and self-tested 3 times did significantly better. So think about it. How often are you tested just 5 minutes after you finish reading? Students who reread put the information into short-term memory. Those who self-tested saved the information in long-term memory, and they remember far more than their classmates. So what does self-testing look like? Using flashcards is an example of self-testing. And all the other examples of strategies on this page are examples of self-testing. You've probably been doing this all along. The second powerful strategy is called distributed practice. When you have just attended a lecture, how much would you remember? How much would you remember a day later? It is shocking how quickly we forget. Take a good look at this graph. In 1911, Hermann Ebbinghaus did research on how fast we forget, and he created this now famous forgetting curve. When he learned something, he quickly began forgetting. By the end of the first day, he had forgotten about half of what he had learned. After the first review, the curve is not quite as bad. He remembered about 65%. With the second review, he remembered close to 78%. And with the third review, he remembered close to 90%. Pretty impressive. I don't know how long he remembered this information, but it is clear that distributed reviews are very effective for improving memory. This, of course, will vary according to the student's interests, ability, the difficulty of the course, and other factors. I suggest a review schedule that changes over time. You'll notice that I do 3 times the first day and then 1 time a day for a week, and so on. You don't need to stick to the suggested schedule. Design a schedule that's right for you and for the material that you're studying. Let's apply what we just learned to using flashcards. When you studied your flashcards for 1 hour, and you compare that to what you learned when you studied the flashcards for 6 days, but only 10 minutes a day. You're still using 1 hour, but when you spread it out, you remember what you're learning much longer. If you aren't already doing it, trying group study is now recommended. I also found it helpful to work with a single study pal for classes in math, physics, and classes where we did a lot of writing. We would check each other's work and share suggestions. They used to recommend that we study the same place and the same time every day. Now, researchers recommend that you study in different places at different times, and I would say some students will find this very helpful. Others will prefer studying the way they always have. If you've been told to study in silence, you might want to go ahead and try to study both with music and then again without music and see what works for you. Taking study breaks when you need them is very helpful. You will actually learn more and remember it longer. It's important that you don't choose one method that you like best and stick to that one. When you use multiple pathways to memory, information is stored in different parts of your brain. Using one part of your brain can activate related areas, helping you remember so much more. Using multiple pathways to memory will both strengthen and lengthen your memory. If you have any comments or questions, please go to my website, or you can email me at jjfishel@gmail.com.